Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar as we experience how Flywheel Strategic is using Sitefinity's Digital Experience Cloud. Now, before we hand it over to our special guest, Scott Snowden, a couple of items about Progress I want to cover. Progress is a global leader in development and deployment technologies. We help nearly 1,700 independent software vendors as partners build applications, build their livelihood on Progress technologies to support over 100,000 enterprises running their mission-critical businesses for the Progress development applications. Progress supports nearly 6 million businesses and 100 million customers using and experiencing applications that are built on our technology. And one of those applications is Sitefinity. We have a lot of customers using Sitefinity and utilizing it and experiencing the great UI and UX capabilities that we bring, including personalization capabilities, which Scott's going to talk about in just a little bit. Sitefinity also brings unmatched mobile support, extensibility within integration with our third-party partners to give you unique and additional attributes that you can go and create and customize your digital experience to better engage with your customers. Even if you have a multi-site environment or multilingual environment, Sitefinity provides you fantastic support. We as marketers have been pursuing personalization for quite some time, and as we try and engage with our customers. Salesforce came out with a blog and a survey that they conducted and said that 88% of these retailers say that their personalization services has increased their effectivity of marketing, which is no surprise. And more so, 80% of these customers expect personalized content. So not only are we becoming more effective in our marketing, but we're also addressing the demands of these empowered consumers, because these consumers, these customers of ours demand a personalized experience within their digital experience that you're offering them. So today we're going to learn much more about that. I'm Greg Shoup. I'm a digital experience thought leader here at Progress. And today with me, we have Scott Snowden, one of the partners at Flywheel Strategic. You know, Scott brings a keen sense of curiosity and determination to all of his business problems. The passion that he brings is to creatively engineer new ways for his clients to really stand out among the masses. His approach is to ask the right questions and take the time to understand the context of each of his clients' position in the market. So Flywheel has been a long-standing partner of Sitefinity, and they bring a full-service digital agency with branding and design that specialize in helping their clients grow. Scott and his team has provided a suite of services ranging from mobile to web development to software application development, and bring together branding, design, and communication all within a digital marketing realm. Flywheel brings this unique combination of aesthetics, business, and technical acumen to solve the problems that their clients bring to them. So Scott, we are super excited to hear from you and to hear some of the unique ways that you're using Digital Experience Cloud at Flywheel Strategic. Scott, take it away.
Thanks, Greg. That's great. I'm very excited to be here and to introduce the Digital Experience Cloud to more people. It's a product that we find very valuable for ourselves, and our clients find it very valuable when they're able to use it the right way, and that's my objective here today. So as Greg mentioned, we are a full-service digital agency. We're a long-standing Sitefinity partner. We've been working with the product since, I think, version 3.7, so we have a good, deep understanding of the product, and we're very excited about the direction that the Digital Experience Cloud is going. So my intention today is to provide an outline for how to get to know the DEC, and I'm going to introduce you to the onboarding approach that we use with our clients to make it easy to understand everything that you can find within the DEC, how to set it up in a nice, gradual, digestible fashion so that you can get as much success as possible in a very manageable way. So what I'm going to start with is an outline of some of the concepts and terms that I'm going to use as I talk today. It just helps so that we're all on the same page. A lot of digital marketers are going to be familiar with these terms, but it again helps to make sure that we all know what I'm saying. I'm also going to touch on two different ways to approach implementing the DEC, and then I'm going to go into depth about which of those two ways we recommend. I'm going to make this pretty real. I'm going to open the DEC. I'm going to give you a demo. I'm going to show you how these concepts that I'm talking about are implemented and come to life in the DEC. And then we'll highlight a few things that you'll get to explore on your own in the future once you've mastered the basics that I'm going to outline today. And we're happy to take any questions that you have so that we can help your implementation be as successful as possible. So let's start with just making sure that everybody here today understands what the Digital Experience Cloud is. The DEC is a very powerful tool for digital marketers. It helps you understand the value of your content. So no longer are you producing content, putting it out there, using some high-level analytics to try and understand if you're getting the right kind of behavior. The DEC tells you quite specifically what content led to what action and influenced which users. It's amazing. That will allow you to have a more informed content strategy so that you can publish content more effectively. You can more intelligently manage the way the traffic on your website is behaving and how you're directing that. And then outside your digital ecosystem, you can be having more contextual conversations with those visitors. So that's what the DEC is in a nutshell. And here are the terms that I'm going to be talking about and the themes that I'm going to be using today. We're going to talk about personas, conversions, known contacts, touch points, lead scoring, and journey timelines. So let's make sure we all understand what those things are. A persona is a stereotypical definition of one segment of your audience. So it's a way to describe a particular audience segment that is meaningful to you. A lot of clients can create personas all day long, but we emphasize the fact that you should start with the ones that you care about the most. It's easy to get carried away here, but describe in as much detail with as much relevance as you can, 1 or 2, 3 or 4 if you have them, audience segments, so that you can create personas. This will all make sense in a moment when I show you how these are put into the Digital Experience Cloud. A conversion is the moment that a user performs a desired action on your website. They might be making a purchase, they might be filling out a contact form, they might be visiting a particular section of your website. You define what is meaningful to you and set those up as conversions. Typically, when you create a conversion, it involves capturing some kind of identifiable information, whether that's through a contact form, whether that's through a purchase, whether that's a request a callback form. When a user is no longer an anonymous visitor and you collect some piece of information that helps you identify that user, they become a known contact. So it's the moment at which they move from being anonymous to being identifiable, they become a known contact. Touch points can be thought of as all your content, but more specifically, it's the content that drives a user towards a conversion. It's the content that influences that desired action that you are looking to see take place. A touch point can be a page, it can be a blog, it can be a video, it can be a download, it can even be a phone call or an email. It's anything that helps influence that conversion. Lead scoring is a tool to help cut through the noise. If you're doing this really well, if you're a larger company, if your conversions are really building big lists of known contacts, it helps to know who to focus on first. Lead scoring helps you assign a value to those known contacts so that you know who is potentially more valuable and who you want to prioritize following up with. And finally, each individual user in the Digital Experience Cloud gets a journey timeline. You can see how each individual user interacted with the content on your website so that when you do a reach out, a follow-up, you can have a very contextually relevant conversation with each individual, making it more powerful and more engaging when you do continue your conversation, whether that's on the phone or through more digital marketing activities. So let's talk about the approach that you can take in order to implement the Digital Experience Cloud. There's basically two approaches. You can either jump in the deep end, or you can walk down the ladder, enter the shallow end, and gradually make it into the deep end. If you've got a consultant or some advisors working with you, if you've got a really good grasp on digital marketing and you've done a lot of work or you've worked with a digital experience cloud before, go ahead and jump in. But even if you are a seasoned expert, getting in the shallow end is what we would recommend. You might move more quickly into the deep end because some of these terms and concepts are familiar to you, but if you follow the approach that I'm advocating here today, it'll just make sure that you understand how the strategy is layered and how you are reaching success and how to evaluate the performance and the metrics that you're able to see inside the Digital Experience Cloud. So let's have a look at that step-by-step approach that we advocate using when you're getting to know the Digital Experience Cloud. So the first step is to define your personas. Understand those audience segments, create the rules in the Digital Experience Cloud so that you know how to track the traffic on your website according to those audience segments. Once you've done that, it's time to define conversions. Conversions are that moment when somebody takes the desired action. If you set up a conversion, you'll automatically start to understand the touch points that are influencing that conversion, and you'll end up with a list of known contacts. Once you have conversions working well, and you want to start to prioritize which contacts to follow up with first, you can add in lead scoring, and that will help you understand the journey timeline of each contact more effectively. So let's dive in and have a look at the Digital Experience Cloud. This is the dashboard for the Digital Experience Cloud that you see once you've logged in. You'll see right away that you'll get some high-level analytics regarding the terminology that I was just talking about. You can obviously change your timeline here to compress or expand on the date range. And the rest of the dashboard helps you see what's performing best at a glance and gives you a good understanding of the personas that are using your website and how that traffic is breaking down. I talked about conversions and touchpoint attribution, so you can understand which pieces of content are having the most impact on the conversions and the activity that you want to see happen on your website. This heat map alone is a very valuable tool inside the Digital Experience Cloud. And I talked about lead scoring and how you can start to filter the contacts that you have in your list to know who to follow up with first. Let's take a look at each one of these aspects in more detail. Starting with personas, when you create a persona, it helps you understand what your audience segments are doing on your website. You can create rules that allow you to classify the behavior of somebody on your website according to their persona. Let's take a closer look. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have a classical definition of a persona. In a more traditional digital marketing or marketer's toolkit, a persona is that stereotypical definition based on things such as gender and age, any other details about your bio or that would uniquely describe this audience segment. You can put that information into the DEC so that you have it here as a useful reference. You can then set up rules that allow you to associate behavior on your website into this persona. Some of those rules might say that if I visit a particular website, if I register for a webinar, if I download a particular file, that's going to suggest to the platform that I am a member of this particular persona. I can associate points, and as the activity continues, I continue to collect points, and once I reach a threshold that I set in my persona definition, the system will start tracking my visit as a member of this particular persona. Once I'm in this persona, then you get to see a lot of great insight about how each audience segment is using your website. If we go back to the overview, a lot of times clients will stop here and pause for a little while. Right now, just looking at well set up personas can be very enlightening. All of a sudden, you know how each audience segment is using your website. It's very useful to set up a few personas and let the data collect so that you can have a look and validate your initial assumptions before going too far with the overall setup of the DEC. Set up some personas, look at the traffic that you're getting, make sure that it makes sense to you. It might immediately lead to a change in behavior and an adjustment to your strategy. You may right away identify that you need to adjust the content that you're publishing to reach different segments more effectively. And you might also be surprised to see that certain personas you thought were insignificant suddenly become very valuable target for your marketing efforts. Once you have personas set up, once you have some data collected in this section of the Digital Experience Cloud, you can move on to tracking conversions. As I mentioned earlier, a conversion can be any moment that you find valuable. That might be a purchase, that might be filling out a contact form, or that might be visiting the store locator page on your website. It may be enough for you to say that if a user has taken that action, it indicates that they're on their way, they're closer to making a purchase, and you can consider that a conversion. It's up to you to determine what activity, what action on your website has got meaning to you. Once you have set up these conversions and they start to collect information, you can drill in on each one and start to see some history on how that's been happening, how this has been performing. And what's beautiful about this is that you start to see what content has been influencing people to make that conversion. What content has led people to take that desired action. If we drill in on the touch points, the system will track this content for you. You can come in and start to define this and refine how it's tracking certain content, but you don't have to do anything out of the box. You can just set up a conversion and you will start to see what content and what behavior is leading people to perform the action that you were looking for. Hugely valuable. Now you know if the white paper that you wrote is working, if you should be doing that more often, if you should stop doing that and start writing articles, or completely rework your strategy, or continue to double down because it's working so well. So once you have those conversions set up, the touch points begin to auto-populate, and you really understand that much more, how on a much more granular level, how well your content is performing. As those conversions start to happen, you also often collect contacts. So people become a known contact in your database. These are the contacts that made it through this conversion. You get to see the persona that they most closely relate to. You can export this result so you can do additional digital marketing activities with this list through another campaign. However you want to reach out to them, you can add them to your CRM, send them to your sales team for follow-up. Very powerful data that you get here. Now let's say that this list is pages long. It's much longer than I can manage here on my own. That's where lead scoring comes into play. Lead scoring is very valuable to help you manage large lists or even smaller lists. Again, you're using a rule set to assign a value based on behavior. So if somebody has contacted you, that is a conversion, but if they continue to read a white paper or visit an event or sign up for a webinar or read a particular blog post, they continue to show additional interest in the subject matter, in the product or the service that you have to offer. So as people continue to develop these behaviors, you can give them more points and qualify them as a stronger lead. That then allows you to go into your lead list and filter for the most valuable leads and most valuable contacts so that you can have a more informed conversation based on which segment is showing the most interest in your content. Let's have a look at journey timelines and how they can help you have more contextually relevant conversations with those leads and those known contacts that you've been able to capture. From either your lead scoring lists or your conversion lists, you can drill in on the actual contacts that have been interacting with your content. We're going to have a look here at all of our leads that have been scored by our lead scoring rules. And we're going to drill in on one particular profile. You get to see all the information that's been collected by the DEC through your lead capture forms or other information sources. At a high level, this shows you which lead funnel they may be scoring well in. It shows you how they identify with the different audience segments through the personas. It helps you understand which conversions led them to become valuable and which content had an influence on those conversions. But we get to see on an individual contact basis their specific journey that has been happening up until this point. We can go right back to their very first visit to the website, and we can see how they've engaged with the content as we go forward. You'll notice that the most recent touch point is the contact form. At this point, they became a known contact. Prior to this, we didn't have any profile information, and they were simply an anonymous user. But because we had started tracking them as an anonymous user, as soon as they gave us their contact information, we were able to associate their previous visits with their known contact record, and we can tie that together, and you can see now from the history that we have what behavior and what interests they had. When you reach out to them or you do other digital marketing activity, you now have a lot more context, and you know that they were particularly interested, they were a part of the gamer persona, they were looking at particular products, they were interested in particular events. So now you can have a much more engaged, much more relevant conversation with individual users and groups of users that come from your list. There's a lot more in the Digital Experience Cloud, but we're not going to talk about that today. We've covered the basics of how to get from setting up your personas, setting up conversions, understanding your known contact list and filtering that effectively with lead scoring, and then understanding each individual contact's journey timeline so that you can start to really accelerate your digital marketing activities. There are other capabilities, as I mentioned, that you'll be able to explore once you've covered these basics. There is machine learning that's happening inside the Digital Experience Cloud to give you recommendations based on the trends that it's viewing on your website and in your data set. You can start to track the digital marketing campaigns, specific activities that you're doing, and understand how those actual activities are changing behavior. And when you're connected with Sitefinity, you can use the profiles and the personas and the other rules that come from the Digital Experience Cloud to help you personalize the content on your website. And you can use that to run A/B content tests, which can be very valuable in helping you refine your messaging and reach each audience segment most effectively. Those are things that are very intuitive, and you'll be able to understand them once you've covered the basics. You'll start to explore those features with ease. So I'm going to pass it back over to Greg now, and we're happy to take any questions that anybody has. Thanks for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. You know, it's so great to see how our partners are using Sitefinity and the Digital Experience Cloud, and just the advantages that it can really provide so many different marketing departments on how to start drilling down to personalization, start drilling down to understanding, you know, who's on their site and the behaviors that are on there. So right now I want to go ahead and open things up for questions. The first question is, how long does it take for activity to appear in the DEC?
Yeah, very good question. I think it happens right away. So it's similar to Google Analytics in that as soon as you connect it to your website, it will start capturing the data from your visitors right away. The difference is, and I think any digital marketer has probably experienced this with Google Analytics. If you need to track something new in Google Analytics or other tools, you have to change some settings, change some filters, and then you get to track from that point forward. The DEC is collecting data as you go, and if you change the definition of a conversion or some of the other rules in the system, it has access to your historical information, and it can do some processing on that historical data, so that if you missed an opportunity to set up some tracking, don't worry, there is the ability to retroactively process some of the information that is in the DEC. So it collects information right away, and then it continues giving you visibilities to that historical information and allow you to do some analysis on that on an ongoing basis.
Awesome. You mentioned Google Analytics, and that fits really well into this next question here. Where does a tool like the Digital Experience Cloud fit if an organization already has a Google Analytics cloud or is tracking their web activity through Google Analytics, and then also tracking their marketing campaigns through Marketo Munchkin?
Yeah, there's a lot of similar tools, but what's unique about the DEC is how it integrates and ties in with Sitefinity. It has benefits over some of the other tools, and we can probably talk to you about those differences one-on-one. But generally speaking, the fact that it's able to plug in so seamlessly with your Sitefinity website is a huge advantage. What you can do with that, and I alluded to it but didn't get into it in this presentation, is get into very detailed personalization rules. You can tie your content personalization strategy in Sitefinity directly to the personas and the behavior that you can see in the Digital Experience Cloud. So there's a lovely tight integration there between those two products, and allows you to also do a very seamless data flow between your lead capture forms that are set up in Sitefinity and the data that is aggregating inside the Digital Experience Cloud.
Yeah, I think you bring a great point up, is that, you know, this takes a lot of this data, but it also provides more advanced steps that you didn't cover here, that you alluded to, like A/B testing, like personalization, based on, you know, the profiles that you've set up and the profiles that you've been tracking. So really, that's a fantastic question. Here's another one, just a real quick one. How long have you guys really been using the Digital Experience Cloud?
We've been using it for quite some time. The Digital Experience Cloud has been around for a while, and it's been evolving and growing into the mature product that it is now. So we've been using it for 5 years or more, and in the last several years, we've been getting a particularly tremendous value out of it for ourselves. It runs on our own website, and we employ all the tactics and strategies that I was talking about today. And then as time goes on, more and more of our clients are bringing it into their ecosystem as well.
Awesome. Here's another question for you. If a visitor is already logged into the site, so if a visitor logs into that site, are they considered a known contact?
If a user logs into a site, are they a known contact? Yes, they are. You got to make sure that there's the right connection set up. But as long as your authentication, as long as your login is the Sitefinity authentication, then it will be captured by the DEC. And if it isn't, then there are still ways to integrate that information and have that profile information show up in the DEC. It's also a particularly wonderful way to capture somebody as a known contact and then continue to see what kind of journey and content consumption behaviors they have on the public-facing side of your website. Because as soon as we do know them, then the DEC is tracking their entire visit, whether or not they're in your sort of secure portal pages or whether they're on the public side of your own website.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that you kind of touched on too during the presentation that I thought was a good point to bring back up is that, you know, we track the users even through to the point from they're anonymous until they're known and then continue on. So we do have that retroactive history, so that when they do raise their hand and say that they are a known user, we do have a history backwards to say this is where their first engagement point was with the site, and track their engagement and conversion from that point forward. So really cool stuff, and I think this next question plays into that just a little bit, is you know, that you started alluding to personalization on web pages for different personas. So can you just go into a little bit more detail about, you know, how you're personalizing web pages on for those different personas? Maybe just kind of a high level overview.
So when you're using content personalization in Sitefinity, you have a bunch of criteria that you can use to define the characteristics of the audience or of the visitor that you want to personalize content for. And in Sitefinity, you have a very powerful set of characteristics to do that targeting with. there's similar characteristics inside the Digital Experience Cloud, but now you don't have to manage them in two places. And you can use the behavior in the Digital Experience Cloud, the persona definitions in the Digital Experience Cloud, some of the campaigns that you set up in the Digital Experience Cloud to manage your understanding of your content strategy there. And then those personas and campaigns and options show up in Sitefinity when the two systems are linked together. So all of a sudden, you remove that extra step in Sitefinity. You can quickly say, I want to personalize for this persona. And then when you are editing a page, if you're not familiar with content personalization in Sitefinity, you can either personalize the entire page, or you can personalize individual content blocks or other widgets on the page. Those content pieces can be personalized to a specific audience segment. So it's a very straightforward manner to say, just switch out the content, this particular content, and show something different to this particular persona. It's a very user-friendly, a content editor can set up these rules and can do that work. You don't need any technical support. Your developers don't need to get involved in helping you manage and track and set this all up.
Awesome. Yeah, and this is one of my favorite features is being able to identify, who is on the site and provide the more of a personalized touch or personalized content, to that persona or to that visitor, even though they're on the exact same page as everybody else, that they can actually receive different content that is more relevant to them based on what we know about them. I think that's really, really cool. Along with that personalization route, let's kind of raise that up just a little bit. It's a really hot topic in marketing. So from your experience, from what you're doing, what do you think the right way to start with personalization is for maybe companies who are either a little apprehensive of getting involved in it because it just seems so complex and so hard, or maybe they're just starting out and they're saying, hey, we want to go ahead and start things out right. What would your recommendation be on how to start with personalization?
Yeah, good question. It can be overwhelming for sure. Once you've got the ball rolling, you end up with a lovely, very effective matrix of, who are my audiences, what are my pages, and what are the content variations that I have for that, and how well is that tracking. I would not advocate for trying to build that and that whole definition on day one. So exactly the way that I was describing, you get started understanding the DEC is how I would parallel that with how you're starting to think about your personalization and your content strategy. So you can either dive in if you have done this before and you understand the concepts clearly and you have a good grasp of your content, build a matrix that knows, here's my personas, here's my content, here are the variations that I want, and manage that in Sitefinity. You'll get there eventually, but if you also want to do it in a more digestible fashion, then as I was describing, start with one page, one audience, one persona, make one change, watch how that behavior happens, try it on another page, get a little bit more sophisticated, and use it as a layered approach to understanding how effective this can be for you. I would never say build it all out and go personalize everything all at once, because you also don't know until you put some things onto your website. You can make a lot of assumptions, and if you go too far with it, you'll quickly learn a lot once you start personalizing content. So if you go too far with your strategy too quickly, you'll have wasted some effort, because you'll do as much as you think you can practically handle while still giving yourself a chance to evaluate what you've done and then take it one step further and go progressively like that. That's my big advice.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. A lot of the talks that I give about personalization is I say that it's not something you do overnight. It is a journey. It is a evolution. It is a maturity model. And you start with what you know, and then you continue on. A lot of people, I think, get hung up on the fact that they want to hyper-personalize right out of the right away, and that's just something that you have to evolve into. You can't start off with hyper-personalization. You need to, exactly what you said, start small and learn and pivot and keep going. So fantastic. Another question here for you, and we're getting close to wrapping up. Is there anything that really surprised you when you started using the Digital Experience Cloud? I mean, for example, you've been doing it for a long time, and do you think that there was at least one thing or a change of course that you did because of the information that you're receiving from the DEC?
Yes, that's a good question too. I have two really cool examples. For ourselves, we have our own content strategy. We publish information on our blog. We author white papers on a regular basis. We put some content out there on social media, and we use different external digital marketing strategies, Google AdWords, other listing sites, LinkedIn, and so forth. We thought, based on Google Analytics, that all of that was bringing us traffic, and isn't this all wonderful? And you can track conversions in Google Analytics, but when we turned on the DEC and started tracking it that way and really got this all built out nicely for ourselves, we discovered that when we author a white paper, it has a dramatically higher impact than any of our other content. And white papers were something we were only doing from time to time when probably I had accidentally written a really long blog post. We better turn this into a white paper. But we discovered that that kind of content may not be getting consumed by as many people, but the people that are consuming it are the ones that we want to be talking to. And that was eye-opening. The other example is a client of ours who set up their personas, and they were really excited about their top audiences that they have been told and they thought were most influential and were using their website the most. And they were shocked to find out that one of those, what they thought was a top audience segment, was, I'm being a bit dramatic, but it wasn't consuming the information that they thought in any way. And then conversely, there was like a niche persona that they defined, and all of a sudden it just highlighted for them the fact that, again, probably a smaller portion of their overall audience, but having a much more dramatic impact on their business growth. So even just setting up personas, watching those interact with your web content was very eye-opening for them.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. All right, I think we have time for probably one or two final questions here. How do you handle a situation when a conversion does not occur on the website that you own, but more on a third-party site? For example, meeting registration.
Yeah, good. Yeah, lots of good questions here today. That's great. So the DEC allows you to integrate with other platforms. So there is an API, there are connectors. You can tie into your CRM or other databases, or you can manually upload a list of activity from some of those other marketing initiatives. So whether it's an event attendee list, whether it's a CRM call list, whether it's any other data like that, as long as you have the same piece of unique identifying information on the list as you do in the DEC, for example, an email address, then the DEC can tie those two together, and it can show you those offline interactions as part of that journey based on the date of those, and you can see how that fits into the overall timeline for your audience.
Perfect. All right, last question here before we wrap it up. How often do you come to the need to define a custom event in Sitefinity to be tracked with the DEC? For example, you might want to track an interaction with a custom widget and use it as a conversion trigger. How easily is it to develop and set up such an event?
Yeah, okay, so we're getting into a bit more of the technical details of implementation, but we've certainly done that before. It happens from time to time. All the content that you can publish natively in Sitefinity is tracked. File downloads, page views, form submissions. You don't have to do anything about that. But sometimes you've got some custom controls or custom experiences on your website. Either you can do it through the native backend API, or you can do it through a JavaScript API. And the JavaScript API is a very lightweight mechanism to fire an event, kind of like Google Analytics, to say, just add an event to this action, and it can be valuable in certain flows to be able to do that. I would say most of the time you don't need to worry about that, but I do appreciate the fact that certain online experiences might benefit from having more precise activity logged in the DEC, and you can do that using the SDK.
Awesome, awesome. Scott, I want to thank you so much for the time that you've given us today and really walk us through your experience with the DEC and how you're using it. And just from these questions, it really shows that, you know, the interest is out there. There are people that are definitely see the value that it brings and the value that you bring with sharing your experiences. Thank you all for attending today's webinar, and we appreciate all the time that you've given us. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys.